During the 19th century, industrialization made nations across the world new and modern, but only one man could promote change in Russia: the Tsar.
The Tsar crushed the people's want for change, but by the 20th century, people would no longer accept an absolute monarchy.
Russia had a conservative government of czars who had divine right. The people were politically suppressed, and there was no right to the elites like in England. If industrialization were to occur, it would have to be from above, and not from below like in England and the rest of the West.
Under Nicholas I, democracy was out of the question and conservative politics were illegal. Nicholas I was traditional, and it would not be until after his death his heir would realize industrialization was necessary.
I have never thought that any system could be better than that by which kings were delegated by Providence to govern the masses.
The first revolutionary society were called the Decembrists because that was the month they staged their rebellion. Their goal was to end serfdom, but they were caught and hanged by Nicholas I. One of the Decembrists was the brother of Vladimir Lenin, who would soon play a major role in the overthrowing of the regime.
But Nicholas I's greatest catastrophe was soon to come, when Russia would face against the world's greatest military powers of the West.
In the 1850s, Nicholas I wanted to extend Russian territory into the Balkans, controlled by the dying Ottoman Empire. But when the English and the French stormed in to support the Ottomans, the Crimean War had begun.
The English and the French fought and moved with the technology of the Industrial Revolution, which meant rifle muskets and improved machinery, while the Russians had the technology of the pre-industrialization era.
Ill-equipped, underfed, outgunned, and outmaneuvered, the military Nicholas thought was invincible was trapped in the European trenches.
Nicholas I died of pneumonia during the war, and his son Alexander II called the troops home. It became clear that Russia was behind economically and technologically, and their ways of life needed to change in order to catch up. Russia was disgraced and no longer considered a world power.
After the embarrassing losses in the Crimean War, Alexander II realizes the changes that needed to be made. Steam and steel were transforming the rest of the world, but not in Russia. The only person that could change this was the Tsar.
Alex made reforms such as trial by jury, civil rights like in Western Europe, and more constitutionalism. But most importantly, he industrialized. He chartered more industries and created a railroad to the Black Sea.
Alex is best known for creating the Emancipation Manifesto, liberating all the serfs in Russia, and he was hailed as the Tsar Liberator. The nobles did not support this because it meant they would no longer have free labor and the economy would collapse.
Alex said, "It is better to abolish serfdom on the government initiative than to wait until the masses begin to abolish it themselves." Serfdom was abolished on February 19, 1861. However, things did not change because all the peasants had to pay poll tax and they were too poor to leave the land. But these poor peasants would soon be the ones who would move to the cities and work in the factories after industrialization had hit Russia hard.
These reforms were not enough for Russian citizens. The People's Will was a radical revolutionary group comparative to those during the Reign of Terror. They believed Russia could not be a free land unless the Tsar was killed. They were led by Sofia Perovskaya, who was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the empire.
The People's Will attempted to assassinate Alex many times, but on March 13, 1881, as Alexander II was on his way to propose a new reform, the Duma, which would be a legislative body similar to that of Parliament, Sofia and her accomplices finally assassinated him. Alexander II's son, Alexander III, came to power and had the revolutionaries hanged.
Although Alexander II made many reforms in an attempt to catch Russia up with the rest of the industrializing world, When his son, Alex III, came to power, he revoked nearly all of his father's reforms. Alexander III became even more of an absolute ruler than his grandfather Nicholas I was.
Although Alexander III rejected the Duma and constitutional policies, he did continue industrialization. But Russia could not escape the horrors of industrialization. By 1894, they were facing the same problems as the West. After 30 years of forced industrialization, Russia's poor working class were as poor as ever. Factories, mines, and farms created harsh conditions and poor health, just like the West. By the fall of 1904, inflation was soaring and the winter brought hunger and hardship. Much of the credit of industrialization is given to Sergei Witta. He was the financial advisor of Alexander II, who promoted railroad building and heavy industry. He is credited with the rapid industrialization of Russia in the late 19th. When Nicholas II came to power, he was often compared to Louis XVI of France. He was not prepared to rule the new industrialized modern world. Nicholas II was oblivious to his people's sufferings and was known as out of touch. During his reign, Imperial Russia went from being one of the four most great powers of the world to economic and military collapse. Nicholas II also continued industrialization. Sergei Witt once again promoted industrialization under the Tsar, and is especially credited for the building of the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was very significant as it promoted global trade.
Under Nicholas II, tensions between Japan and Russia grew because of an imperialistic conflict in Manchuria. Russia refused to back out of Manchuria and Korea, and while Japan tried to negotiate, Russia was inflexible and were not afraid to see a military battle because they figured a victory for Russia would put off the growing threats of revolution within.
On February 6, 1904, Japan cut off diplomatic relations and negotiations with Russia, and 2 days later attacked Russia suddenly and without a declaration of war. But Russia wasn't worried, as they figured they had a victory in the bag. Lo and behold, once again, Russia was quickly defeated because they were still not as industrialized as the rest of the world. This was a real wake-up call for Russia. Industrialization caused for major losses in Russia, as they engaged in battles that they did not have the technology to back up. And in this case, industrialization caused for even more opposition of the Tsarist regime. The Russian loss in the Russo-Japanese War was another shock to the world and to Russia itself. It proved just how far behind Russia was.
This connects to the AP theme of state building and expansion, as the conflicts of the Russo-Japanese War was caused by the building of empires. The horrors of industrialization led to an unsettled society of poverty, and people wanted change. Father Gapone organized a group of workers who had the ideals of police socialism inspired by Sergei Zubitov. But the group was infiltrated by people with more radical ideas than Gapone would accept. But Gapone agreed to march to the Tsar's palace to petition for basic economic and political reforms.
On Sunday, January 9, 1905, workers and families marched to the Winter Palace, planning on having a non-violent protest asking their king to help them out. But when they arrived, they faced troops and mounted police who ordered them to stop. It is important to note that this group was very different than the People's Will, who was much more radical. The day the protesters fled to the palace, Nicholas II was away with his family. And when the protesters did not comply with the soldiers, they shot at the crowd, killing over 800 people and wounding even more. And this day will be forever known as Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday caused worker and student strikes and uprisings throughout Russia. Nicholas II was nicknamed Bloody Nicholas, and there was even more opposition against the Tsar than before. Bloody Sunday marked the start of the 1905 revolutions against the Tsar. People throughout Russia went on strike in response to Bloody Sunday. On October 26, 1905, the St. Petersburg Soviet of Workers' Deputies was formed. This example of working-class unity and strength quickly spread to other industrial cities. Industrialization caused this new working class to be formed, and they would be the ones who would try to overthrow the regime. This connects to the AP theme of development and transformation of social structures, as industrialization caused the working middle class to arise. The new working class was attracted to Marxism. They were inspired by the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels. Socialism was created in Russia, and ideas of revolution spread across the nation.
The development of socialism in Russia represents the AP theme of creation, expansion, and interaction of economic systems.
Nicholas II was forced to create the October Manifesto, which created the Duma and gave basic civil rights. But by December, he used loyal troops to put down the St. Petersburg Soviet and to crush those on strike in Moscow.
While all this chaos was going on in Russia, Vladimir Lenin, who was inspired by his older brother, who was executed in the Decembrist revolts, formed the Bolshevik Party, and as World War II rocked Russia, the people had had enough. Conditions due to industrialization were too poor to be involved in a foreign war, and Lenin and his followers overthrew the Tsar in October of 1917, and the Russian Revolution had begun.
Overall, Russia would never catch up to the world in technology until Joseph Stalin rose to power. But the steps made to industrialize Russia led to ups and downs that would change Russia forever.
Russia would not be where it is today without industrialization.